Hello, and welcome to my Stronghold Definitive Edition review. We've just completed the core campaign of the game on the channel, so if you want to know a little bit more about Stronghold and what it's all about, I recommend replaying through all that. I will be covering lots of aspects of the game, so I will be spoiling parts of the campaign if you're not familiar with it, so apologies if that's the case. Do recommend watching it if that's not. But also, you might want a bit of inspiration to give it a go yourself, so hopefully this video can inspire you. I'll be covering gameplay and mechanics, story and campaign, graphics and visual style, sound and music, performance stability, replayability and content, and finally innovation and originality, which will then accumulate into an overall score of this title. It is only going to be focused on Stronghold Definitive Edition. I'm not going to be covering the original game that was released a while ago, and I also won't be reviewing the Crusader, which is coming out. This is solely on this title alone. So if you want to see how I go about doing that, stay tuned. But yeah, let's just jump into the review. So firstly, let's go into the gameplay and mechanics. What is Stronghold Definitive Edition all about? At its core, Stronghold is two things. It's building a thriving castle economy, and either you'll be defending that fortification against an invading army, or you'll be assaulting a fortified position or castle. And at the front, if I'm honest, I feel it delivers on that aspect. Throughout the campaign, you scale up in difficulty. You go from basic tools and fortifications of wood and spears, and then advancing into the kind of more end game of this title to stone, steelworks or ironworks, I guess, and massive armies, massive sieges and stuff like that. Every mission starts out on the essentials. You need to build a stockpile, you need to build a granary operations and the food that comes with that, wood cutting huts, and then from there you need to scale those chains of industry. So building up kind of the core fundamentals, from building up your weaponry, or from a food perspective, grinding down wheat into flour, into bread. That core part of the game is essential. In every single episode, that is a core aspect of it, is building up your essentials. And then from there is then you'll be setting up defensive layers. So that can include moats, fortified walls and towers, and potentially at later end of the game, you'll be putting catapults and ballistas on those towers. In skirmish mode, you'll define yourself defending a corner of the map and setting up chokeholds. You'll be placing archers and crossbowmen on the high ground, leveraging boiling oil on gatehouses. So at every step of your fortifications, you're thinking, how can I reduce this massive army that is against me, full of siege weapons and advanced military, into a particular area of your defensive structure and wiping them out. It's a real satisfaction from my point of view to fend off a big siege and using your fortifications to its advantage, and proper planning that. Every unit has its unique part, but if I'm honest, I think this is part of the downside is once you are defending, there's only really two units you really need to leverage, and that is archers and crossbows. Melee troops can sometimes feel clunky, particularly the swordsmen, which are really slow. And if you advance throughout the game, they're not really needed unless you've got through the walls, you've got through all of the kind of, I guess, traps and moats. Otherwise, you're kind of still going to stay with the mid-range or mid-part of the game weaponry. So crossbows, macemen, spearmen. So from that perspective, it's a bit clunky. And also, there isn't really what you call a formation of those troops. You can't set up particular advancements. Once they kind of get clumped together, which is good in one aspect, but it's not really immersive when you see like a massive line of troops. So overall, if I say the gameplay and mechanics are starting out, I'd give it probably a 7.5 out of 10. It's really strong. It's, from my perspective, the castle element and the economy side is its strongest feature, and the satisfaction of setting up a strong fortification with archers and crossbowmen. But from an overall mechanics point of view, it's quite basic still. Next up is story and campaign. So we played through the whole campaign on the channel. There's 21 military missions in total, and they have reimagined the old characters, or the classic characters, such as the rat, the snake, the pig, and the wolf. That gave me a massive flashback when I first played the game many, many moons ago, and every single character has its uniqueness. So you've got the rat, who's a bit dim-witted. You've got the snake, who is a backstabber, very politically minded. You've got the pig, who is just a brute and evil. And then you've got the wolf, who's cunning. And I guess it kind of symbolizes the characters that they are. But for me, yeah, the voiceovers, the between missions, they still stick to the core of what it was, and I think that's really, really unique. Instead of trying to rewrite the whole campaign in the Definitive Edition, they've remastered it, which is really good. The missions do range from straightforward assaults to really difficult resource management of starved defenses. I'm going to use the monastery mission. That's a really difficult one, so you have to juggle the aspects of resource gathering and also defending against an advanced army of the pig. That is really, really difficult. And there's some other missions. So early doors, you have a tiny force, and you have to ambush an enemy encampment in the snakes mission, and stuff like that. I think it's from a campaign's perspective, it's really, really cool. So the nostalgia is real, but there isn't really what I'd call much content. I know there's other campaign missions that I haven't played through yet, but there isn't a massive, major narrative in the expansions or link. So I know there's a campaign which links to the rats, but being a captain. So yeah, the core story in the campaign is there, but I feel like it is just a remastered version of that campaign, which isn't too bad, but there isn't really much else to it. So if you have already played through those campaigns before in the earlier title, you're not going to have anything major new. It's just a remastered. So, and it could be a bit shallow for those veterans, but for somebody who is new to the title, it could be quite cinematic. So for my overall, when it comes to the story and campaign, I'm going to give it a 6.5. I think they've done a really good job at remastering it. Next up on the review is graphics and visual style. So the visuals for me have been lovingly overhauled, is the best way to put it. The buildings look sharper, the unit animations are much better, the overall terrain has depth and much more crisper from the original title. I'm going to talk about the original title and how it kind of varies from that, but overall I'd say the visuals are much better. The game supports higher resolution, so you can zoom out much more without breaking things, which is a huge plus. So you can zoom out and you can kind of really review the landscape. Some of the new visual styles, so a highlight for me is when the fire envelops a castle. It does feel like a massive, a huge animation and a big deal. Although if it's, I've had like missions where my whole army's just gone up in flames. It's like brilliant, but it does look much better. So the animations are much better, and the siege weapons look much crisper. The character portraits in the campaign have been redone to give it much more. So from that perspective, I feel like they've done a really good job at remastering the graphics and the style of the game, which still keeps it to its core. But don't expect anything groundbreaking when it comes to like 3D animations. It's still all the classical style of Stronghold that we all dearly love. The buildings can feel a bit flat. The unit designs are still quite basic when it comes to the attacking kind of styles. There isn't anything really unique, so when you get into a big mosh pit of fighting, it can seem a bit clunky. So from my perspective, it's a remaster, not a reimagine. So it's been more polished, but it hasn't been reinvented. So from that perspective and nostalgia, I'm going to give this a strong 7 out of 10. They haven't really done anything groundbreaking on new animations, and I know there is plans for that from the developers to add more to the game, new units, which could reimagine this title. But I think overall, based on the remaster, they've done an exceptional job. Moving over to the sound and music, and probably it's one of the strong aspects of Stronghold. The original soundtracks have been fully remastered, reimagining those kind of, I guess, flutes and the drums and the medieval ambience of combats, particularly when you're just about to siege a castle, and the whole music and the ambience changes to that warfare. It's an immersive experience. The unit voices have been re-recorded. There is some frustration when you have the error messages or the lack of resources constantly spamming you, and you can change that, but I kept it in just for good purpose. But overall, yeah, all the voices have been redone, but they kept their original charm, which is really, really cool. From the siege perspective, as I referred to earlier, I think that's the key aspect of the sound. Everything feels like it's a warfare, from the stone hitting the fortifications to the fire and the steel all going on at once, the arrows hitting units and the collapsing of kind of siege equipment or the towers. I feel like, from my perspective, they've done a cracking job. I don't think it needs any more from a sound perspective. So from my perspective, the sound just adds to the drama of the moment. So from that point of view, I'm going to give it a solid 8 out of 5. I think the sound is probably... I don't think it can do any more when it comes to sound. Moving into the latter sections of the review, let's just look at the performance and stability. From a tech side, there's very few bugs. I don't think I had any bugs. And I'm trying to think through my replay, which is really, really solid from the developer's point of view. It ran smoothly on my settings of everything's maxed out to the beans. There was no frame rate drops. The load times were really quickly. There was no crashes in my overall 10 plus hours of playthrough. That being said, there is still the challenge when it comes to some of the hotkeys and the limitations when it comes to the UI and finding... There's a few clunky issues, but I think that's just because of the general game that it is, and I'm not going to downplay that when it comes to overall performance and stability. I think that's just the gameplay itself and keeping the core aspect of the game solid. So overall, I think performance and stability has to get the highest score out of all these. They've done a really good job at remastering and reimagining this tile. So overall, I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. Replayability and content. So there's a fair bit of content available outside of the original campaign. So they do have economical missions. So I have tried a few of those. They are challenging. So you get hit by a lot of famines, a lot of fires, which is really annoying, but challenging. So you do have the option for economic missions. There's some skirmish modes. You can actually build your own custom maps and upload them to the workshop, so you can play through other players' maps, which I think is really cool. So the improved map editor is really, really solid. But once you've kind of got through the original campaigns and finished the skirmishes, I don't think there's any kind of anything next. There's been no major enhancement when it comes to multiplayer. There's no kind of mod, apart from the maps, no major mod support. So yeah, from that side, there isn't loads of replay value. It's still obviously, at the core, a strong city builder, and there's lots of fun to have to redo some of the campaigns, maybe build bigger and grander castles and fortifications, and then just, I guess, throw the biggest army possible and see if your castle can handle it. So that's probably the replay value, but it's quite basic. So from a score perspective, I'm going to give it a 6.5. Lastly, in our scores, innovation and originality. As it is a definitive edition, it's a full restoration. It's not a brand new game, so I can't really score this one higher. If I'm honest, it's more of a it's a restoration of the original. So yes, it's been enhanced with modern AI and better graphics and more dynamic sieges, and the economy's had a little bit of an overhaul. But overall, it's still the original game that it was. So there isn't a huge amount of originality with the Definitive Edition, which I think that's what we were asking for as gamers. We weren't looking for the next Stronghold. They do have ideas with the Crusader to add more kind of AI characters and more depth to the game. So I think they've recognised that they would like to grow more into this title. But if I would keep this strictly to Stronghold Definitive Edition, it is a cleaned up, better presented game than the original, but it hasn't been hugely innovated on. So from that perspective, it hits the mark, but it's not original. So from a score perspective, I'm going to give this a 5.5. Lastly, the overall score. So combining all of the things that I've just mentioned there, I feel like Stronghold Definitive Edition earns a B on my grading scale. It's a solid hit, a restored classic, and you know what you're going to get. It delivers what it needs to for the fans of the title, where we've all been craving these remasters. A lot of old school gamers like me, where we've played the likes of Stronghold and Caesar 3 and Pharaoh, we want to replay the games that we remember from our childhood, and this game does it in spades. It is perfect reimagination of a classic. It's not trying to change the whole genre. It's not trying to add loads of quirks to the game. It's not trying to revolutionize the title. They've got some ideas in the future, the developers, to add more to it, but for this title, they've smashed it out the park. It's a city builder, and it does a perfect job at that kind of castle building, sieges, fortifying your castle, creating a civilization that is efficient with loads of resources and people want to come and stuff like that. So if you are a fan of the original Stronghold, you'll love this. For newcomers, it's probably what you call a niche title. It's going to be hard for maybe some of the die-hard RTS fans to get into it, but I feel like because of the elements of the siege and the challenge, it will give a lot if you've never played this title before. So I feel like it's a well-earned return of Stronghold. It's well worth a buy. What did you think of Stronghold? Have you played through it before? What were your general thoughts? Do you agree with this review? Have I been too critical of some of the holes and the gaps? Have I been too nostalgic in my review? Maybe I went too strong. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you enjoyed this review, make sure to hit a like and a subscribe and notifications on if you like more of this type of games. We do plan to go through the full playthrough of Stronghold Crusader, so make sure to keep an eye on your YouTube feed for that. Otherwise, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye for now.